steps of SIS again. One is become used to doing talks outside SIS, right? And outside Triple S. So it's good to be back here. So I wanted to start by, so this is a proper, I was told this should be like a class. So this is going to be like a class. So I wanted to start actually by telling you that there are many aspects to thinking about the Global South, but today I don't want to lay down the agenda for thinking about the Global South. Because in my opinion, that agenda has been set from Latin America and Africa and South Asia at least a decade, 15 years ago, 2 decades ago. And now we are at the stage where we can actually do it. We can show what it is to think from the Global South. So there are elements to thinking from the Global South. Location is an important element. That is to say, we don't believe that there is a universal abstract position from which we can speak. Location matters, and location is extremely complex. It has to do with time, it has to do with space, it has to do with the different identities you carry in that time and space. So no one speaks from a position that is not located. That's one idea that emerges when you think of the Global South, hence thinking from the Global South. So location is important. The idea of translation becomes very important because we're not, and I don't mean only between different languages of the Global South, but I mean between different conceptual universes. So there's constantly a translation going on. You use the word secular, I use the word secular, France uses the word secular, India uses the word secular. In India, the regime uses the word secular, and the other people, it's the regime versus the rest. So the rest use the word secular. We use it in very different ways, but we're using the same term. So there's translation happening. So these are two of the elements I can place here if we were to think about an agenda for thinking of the Global South and how to speak from. But as I said, I'm simply going to hopefully do it. And I'm going to do it through the idea of justice. What does it mean to think of justice from the Global South? But before I begin, let me begin, not before I begin, I have begun. So let me begin with an astonishing statement, which many of you would have noted, and if you're from SIS, you certainly should have noted, by Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. A couple of days ago, he was addressing the Munich Security Conference, and he was addressing the European leaders. And I'm going to read some parts of his speech as it was reported in the media. And in fact, this speech was also on US state sites. So this is not, believe it or not, he actually said these words. And he received a rousing applause from the European leaders. So this is some of the paragraphs that I'm going to read to you. This is Marco Rubio. This is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers, pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it began to contract. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop then, as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again together now. You understand what he's saying? But the work of this new alliance should not be focused only on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on, together, advancing our mutual interests and new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation, creating a Western supply chain to critical minerals not vulnerable for extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South, unquote. So if we wanted a clearer statement about what the agenda for the US is, and the fact that he got a rousing standing ovation from the European leaders, tells us how the global South is viewed, tells us that the stories that we used to say, yes, 1945 meant something to us, it was the era of decolonization. Yes, Columbus meant something, it was the beginning of the colonization of the Americas. Yes, the 19th, 18th century meant something, it was the beginning of the colonization of Asia. But Marco Rubio is quite brazenly standing there and saying, we lost it for a while, but we can do it again. So now it's very clear what the agenda is. If we ever thought that the era of colonialism was past with Venezuela and so on, we know exactly what's happening. So it's interesting to see how the idea of global South is being considered here. It's literally like the classes on colonialism you would have studied if you did a BA in political science. Markets, raw materials, it's like that's what the global South is. And you can shamelessly stand there and say colonialism. So in short, what he's saying is colonialism was good. It made Europe and the USA great. The end of colonialism has ruined things for the global North. So let's march right back into the era of undisguised naked imperialism. So this is just a reminder in case you thought we could forget about colonialism as something in the past, or if you thought, and I find this happens on and off among academics, that all this global North, global South doesn't make any sense and there's no need to talk about it. There's a very clear sense in the imperialist map of what is the global North, what is the global South, who deserves to lead, who should be exploited. Through military expansion, it's very clear. Now, of course, I do wonder how the present regime in India that keeps on and on about decolonization can be so sweetly compliant with the colonial powers requirements, but that's another matter. Now, the term global South, as I'm going to use it, and so that's one of the other things that we believe or work with people like us and scholars and students and intellectuals like us. We believe that there are continuing debates inside among ourselves. There are continuing debates. We are not all in agreement on everything. So I'm going to talk about when I use the term global South, there's a very specific way in which I'm using it. It does not refer to a geographical region. I don't mean that I have concocted this idea of the global South. I mean, I'm going to draw on scholarship which sees the global South like this. So the term global South does not refer to a geographical region, nor to a category within a developmentalist discourse. It is intended to indicate a space of thought. That's how we're going to use the term global South here. It indicates a space of thought, the possibility of reevaluating and learning from speech that exists on the margins. Now, once you say the global South is not a geographical space just below the equator, it's not that. It's a conceptual idea. It draws from the way the map is drawn and what the global South means and the way Rubio used the notion of global South. It draws from that. But we are not talking of a geographical space. We want to use it to refer to a space of thought, which means speaking from the margins and, and learning from speech in the margins. That's the idea. Now, when you conceptualize Global South like this, then we realize that there are spaces within the geographical Global North which are part of the Global South. For example, the thought of African Americans in the United States of America, of indigenous people in the Americas and Australia. And this could also apply then perhaps to some parts of Europe, around the Mediterranean, for example, because the countries of Southern Europe have had long histories connecting them to North Africa, around the Mediterranean. So, and they're also in that sense within Europe, it's seen as less developed than the countries of the north, like Scandinavia, right? So, there are possibly ways in which even parts of Europe, Eastern and Central Europe, for example, and these have histories that cut through neat continental divisions. So to think from the Global South is also to reject the idea that the world is so many continents divided by oceans. Oceans are conduits. Oceans don't separate, oceans connect. And there's a whole field of oceanic studies that shows us that the connections between these, between coastal areas, between all these continents, extend through trade, through conquest, through indentured labor, through slave trade, meaning to say it's not all positive and healthy, the contact, right? But any contact creates a confluence. So there's this term that Ranjit Hoskote and Elijah Trojanov use, confluence, and there's a very lovely book called Confluences, which you might like to read, which says that all culture is produced by confluence. So this is actually important to remember, because one of the things that Rubio says, by the way, that speech is worth reading, really. We should just frame it and hang it up here and there, because it's like an